morning everyone and welcome to this Zoom session. Today we are going to start with Unit 4 and within this Unit 4 we are going to start with technical style. Technical style consists of cliché, redundancies, choice of words, sentences, descriptive sentences, narrative sentences, expository sentences and sentences which are used for defining and classifying. Also paragraphs. And within paragraphs, we are talking today about length and writing, introduction and conclusion. Now we will move to our first topic within technical style, which is clichés. And clichés is defined as a phrase or an opinion that is overused and shows the lack of original thought. So if you have been using some phrase or some word over and over again, you need to think again and you need to probably think of a fresher phrase or a word to bring in some amount of interest in what you are speaking about. Let us look at the examples. Some of the examples here are actions speak louder than words, and we have all heard about this. We know, a lot of people talk about this, and this is something very, very cliched. This is not something new, and there's nothing fresh to it. Second one is you can't please everyone. You're quite right, you can't please everyone. And this phrase or this idiom is something which is used over and over again by people, and therefore again it has nothing new to offer. Third one is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and we have all heard about it and we keep hearing about it all the time. And this again is a very cliched usage of an idea like this. Love is blind, and who hasn't heard of it? And again, this is something which is very commonly used, to tell about what love is all about, and therefore, again, this is something which is very, very cliched. And the last one is hello friends. And hello friends is something that you must have heard, for instance, on YouTube videos, and this kind of opening has become so common and it is absolutely cliched. And there's no freshness to it. So these were the 5 ones, and we looked further, at the other 5 examples that we have of some popular cliches. The next one is, and they lived happily ever after. And we have also, read this in the fairy tales books, and we know this again is, something which is used again and again by, many of the new writers or the early writers, the amateur writers. They use this phrase at the end of the story. So we know this is also very, very cliche. Fall head over heels. So if you fall head over heels in love, it means that you're hopelessly in love. And we know and we have heard it again and again, people using it and it being written in the magazines and newspapers. So this is again something which is very, very cliched. The quiet before the storm. Again, this is also used. It's about the lull before thing big or bad happens. So the quiet before the storm, and we have heard about it. So this is also a very cliched usage. Ignorance is bliss, and this is also a cliched usage. 5th one is between the devil and the deep sea. We have also again heard it, and again this is a cliched usage. Now let's move over to the next one, redundancies in technical writing. Now redundancy means using more words than is necessary. There are 3 types of redundancies. The first one is use of unnecessary phrase. Right, so let's first check the first example. Sunny learned English in a quick manner. Now we didn't really have to use the manner there because we could just use the adverb quickly and make the sentence shorter and crisper and make it look absolutely alright. Sunny learned English quickly, and this is absolutely correct. So we don't really need to use manner, which is an extra word being used there. So if you are used to using more words than is necessary, you really need to pay more attention to your usage and correct it. The next example here is the disease was very serious in nature of it. Well, we don't need to use in the nature of it. It is an extra here. So what can we do about this sentence. We just need to write the disease was very serious, and that would have done the job well. In fact, we can even take away very in this sentence. Though it would be grammatically correct to say that the disease was very serious, even very is regarded as a feature which is making, which is redundant to this sentence. So we could have just said the disease was serious. So something is serious or it is not. So that is the idea in dropping very from the sentence. Okay, so let us look at the other kind of redundancy, which is the second type of redundancy which we want to talk about. It is about repetition of words with the same meaning. So if you are repeating the same word but with a synonym, then it is again redundant. So let's check the first example. The bag of rice that we have is sufficient enough for 2 weeks. Now you're using sufficient and you're using another synonym for sufficient, which is enough. So if you said the bag of rice that we have is sufficient for 2 weeks, it would have been correct, and enough is not required. Okay, so let's look at the next example. The class advanced forward rapidly. Now again, if you look at this example, forward and rapidly both mean one and the same thing. So you might as well use only one, which is more appropriate to the sentence, is the one which you would want to retain in the sentence. So we would want to say the class advanced rapidly. Right? So this is how we do it. Now we look at the third kind of redundancy, which is caused by the repetition of noun by a pronoun. Now let us check some examples to understand what it means. First one is, my teacher, he said to watch news on television. So when you're saying my teacher and you're repeating the idea of the teacher by using he in place of teacher, then it is redundant. So you might want to say, my teacher said to watch news on television, and that would have been correct. Next one is hospitalization that covers room, meal and medicine charges. Right, so again here hospitalization has been repeated as an idea in that. That is actually pointing at hospitalization. The idea that is repeated is that of this word hospitalization. So you would want to say hospitalization covers room, meal and medicine charges. So that finishes our redundancies, the 3 types of redundancies, and now we go over to the next thing in technical style, which is the choice of words. And we know that in technical writing we need to be accurate, we need to be precise, and every word has a certain meaning and it is there with a purpose when it is written in a technical writing or in a piece of technical writing. If it appears, then it appears with a certain purpose there. It is not written in a literary way. It's not written in a literary way. So it is different from literature, basically. It is not an art, it is a science. So when we consider that, we need to know what kind of words we can use in technical writing. So here are some listing given, which says whenever possible use shorter and simpler words. So when you use shorter and simpler words, it conveys the idea more accurately than when you use bigger words. The next one is use precise language. That is to say that if you are trying to convey a certain idea, get as close to the detail of it as possible. You don't want to sound vague. You would want to be very precise in stating what you want to state, because science is a lot more exact than arts. And you always would want to quantify and qualify accurately, and which is very, very important. So if you read some of the passages that are given in your science books, you would find that there is no scope for literary words there or big words there. Very simple and accurate words are used to state any idea or to talk about any object. The next one is use nouns and verbs instead of adverbs and adjectives. Now, nouns and verbs help to tell us accurately what we are talking about. We are not talking about things which are abstract in nature in science. There's no scope for such things in science, so we don't really qualify it so much by using adverbs or using adjectives. We want to be as exact as possible. So if we are saying that something is kept here, we would want to say, okay, something is kept here. Or we wouldn't want to say that something was kept at some place in a nice manner or nicely, for instance. So that is the difference between science and art. So we would want to use more of nouns and verbs than adverbs and adjectives, and we should always avoid repetitions. And avoiding repetitions means that you avoid using, say for example, the same thing again and again, and you make it monotonous. So you need to avoid repetitions, and this is a mark of good writing, that you avoid repetitions. Unnecessary repetitions are not useful, though repetitions do contribute towards making the paragraph look cohesive. That is, it is nicely put together and the ideas are flowing from one sentence to another. It does make it look very cohesive when we use, for example, pronouns. So it does make the paragraph look more cohesive, but we are not trying to overdo that, and that is very, very important. Now we look at the next important feature technical writing, which has to do with sentences. So what kind of sentences do we see in technical writing? So the first sentence type that we are talking about here is the descriptive sentences. Now, descriptive sentences are those that describe something. In technical writing, to describe something precisely, concrete words are used. Again, we are not trying to say that something is pretty or beautiful or nicely made. We are not trying to say that. We are trying to give a very accurate description of something. There is more use of nouns and verbs and adverbs and adjectives, and this is something that I have discussed before. So in examples, we can look at the first one, which says, the beaker with 250 ml brine solution was kept on the tripod stand over the burner to boil. And you can see that this is a description of a process that was done. So this is basically a description, and this is how it is written in a very exact words, by using very exact words, by describing that where this beaker was put. It was put on a tripod stand and over the burner to do what? To boil. So this is how it is done in science. We like to be very, very precise about what we are doing. Because remember, anything that you describe needs to be able to be replicable. It needs, if it is repeated again, the results must be the same. This is very important to science, and that is why we want to describe things, as accurately as possible. The validity and the reliability of the results, as you know, is very important in science, and this can only happen when we use very exact words to describe what is being described there. The second one is, the machine has 2 exhaust fans on either side to channel the air outside. So this one again, you can see that it is a description of how this machine is structured, that it has exhaust fans on either side to channel the air to the outer side or to outside. So this is how it is. in a very exact way it is described. Okay, so next kind of sentences that we use are narrative sentences. So narration is not just in literature, it can happen in science as well. But the difference is that narration is not of the far-fetched kind. We are not trying to describe some scenery in terms of adverbs and adjectives. Here it is very, very exact. So narrative sentences are those that tell about the events, like what happened first, what followed, and what would happen next, and things like that. And it can also have a chronological account to it. For example, the experiment was set up at 11 in the morning. Sometimes the time at which the experiment has been set up is very important to that experiment itself. Second example is, in a pump, the function of a piston is reversed and force is transferred from the crankshaft to the piston for the purpose of compressing or ejecting the fluid in the cylinder. So again, this is a narrative sentence. It is narrating how this whole thing works in a pump. That is how the whole function of the piston is reversed in a pump. So this is a narration of sorts. Right, so now we get on to the expository type of sentences. And expository sentence is one that explains. It is, expository means to explain, so it explains. Now the example is, first one is, the atom is made up of smaller particles known as protons, neutrons and electrons. So it is explaining here that how is atom constituted. What are its constituent smaller particles? So this is an explanation. Next one is, GitHub is a GIT or Git hosting repository service, but it adds many of its own features. Now again, this one is an explanation of what a GitHub is. Right, and now we come to defining and classifying in technical writing, and you must have seen most of the science is concerned with defining things, that how does something functions, or in classifying things as to what is the nature of the substance or an object and how it can best be grouped into larger groups. So this is how science functions. So in technical writing, we are often trying to either define something or classify something by showing either some similarities or differences. This can be done by using descriptive or expository styles in writing. Now here, one of the examples that have been taken up is, matter is something that has mass and occupies space. So this is trying to define what matter is, and this definition by heart by now. So this is a definition, and it is also classifying matter in terms of its ability to exhibit this property of having mass and also having a volume. So it is something that is that has mass as well as volume. So this is how it is also classificatory in nature. Okay, and next we go over to the paragraphs. Now within paragraphs we are discussing lengths, and now if you have read your own science books, you know that the paragraphs are not very long and winding. They're not really very big. They are short, precise, and they cater to the subject at hand, and they finish up with say some conclusion of the result or a summary of what has gone before. So this is how the whole thing is structured. And generally the length of the paragraph rarely exceeds 100 to 125 words, and most paragraphs will have 3 to 6 sentences at the most. And now the introductions are written in a very in a factual manner. They are very precise, and they are definitely not written in a literary style. They're not you're not sketching images, or you're not talking about some kind of scenery. So it is very specific, it is very precise, and This is how it is written. And they describe the subject directly to be discussed in the later section of the writing. They just directly take up the subject which is the point of reference there, and what would be talked about next in the discussions section. And the conclusion is something generally which summarizes whatever has gone before, or it summarizes the results. So this is how the paragraphs are structured in the scientific literature or in technical writing.